Deirdre, who are you and what is your mission right now?
Big question. I am co-founder, chief commercial and legal officer at Hertility. I am a dual qualified lawyer. So I did a master's in medical law and then I specialised in venture capital and M&A before starting the fempire that is Hertility. And our mission is essentially to provide accurate, personalised, preventative diagnostic healthcare for all women in their homes to make it as accessible and affordable as possible, but never compromise on clinical excellence. So to give women answers in days, not years.
And why did you start it initially? Was there, one thing that kind of showed you that this was a huge problem that you need to fix?
There wasn't one thing, and I can't claim that I started the concept. So I have an identical twin sister, my womb mate. And she is a world-leading expert in prenatal genetics and fetal medicine. And so she's a tenured professor at University College London. She lectured masters and medical students in reproductive medicine, reproductive health. And one of the things that was the constant in her work was the clinical discovery, the discovery in the lab for ways to reduce diagnosis times, but more in particular, because she is a geneticist, ways to find cures for the rarest of genetic conditions, And yet, there we were both in our 30s with this huge glaring question about our own fertility and about sort of the things that she was lecturing on, which is age-related fertility decline and the things that might impact someone's reproductive health. And the questions kind of arose about, okay, fine, you could be solving for the most rare of genetic conditions, but what about the most common of female conditions? What about the 1 in 3 women that has a gynecological condition? What about the 1 in 10 that has PCOS, 1 in 10 endometriosis, 1 in 6 couples that are infertile? The bigger question was, why aren't we solving for the 50% of the planet and the most common conditions that impact them? And I think that the kind of experience I had at the time, I was working in Cooley, which is a US international law firm, helping other companies to raise money. And I couldn't help but think that my own twin sister had 100 times the intellect and ability of all of the founders that I was helping to raise money for silly ideas, which to me, they seemed silly. So we really wanted to bring the clinical acumen out of the lab and into the hands of women everywhere. And so it began as a personal problem to begin with, where we both recognized that this was a question to say, okay, if you have access, if Helen had access to every expert in endocrinology, gynecology, fertility, and reproductive medicine, but she didn't have answers to any of the questions she had about her own body. It was just, why don't you just try and have a baby? Then you'll figure out if you're infertile. Or why don't you just not worry about it? You're so young, you don't need to worry about this stuff, even though we know that all of the statistics and data suggest otherwise. And I think that for her, not having those answers, it asked the question, okay, how is it that if I have access to all of these experts, but no access to just finding out, then there's clearly a gap. And then from my perspective, I have access to every insurance policy, every benefit within the workplace, and yet no answers about my own health. So no way to check in. The growing solution being, just freeze your eggs. We'll pay for you to have IVF. And I really have always thought that that's quite a barbaric approach. I think that to say we should be paying to help you avoid needing IVF, not we should be paying for you to have IVF as if it's some bandage. So I think the growing awareness of the gaps that existed in the healthcare profession, but equally on the national healthcare system, the answer was you have to be actively trying for 2 years to conceive before you'll be sent for routine tests, or you have to have had 4 miscarriages, or as we've seen with our data, the 72% of people aren't even eligible for NHS-funded treatment, and yet they will wait on wait lists. So the solutions on the national health system were so negligent to let women wait, and then oftentimes wait into their absolute demise, wait until there's no more hope left. It just didn't seem viable. So we really wanted to, together with Dr. Gatroy, our co-founder, who's an ovarian biologist, rapidly reduce this sort of time from symptom to solution. Dr. Victoria is an ovarian biologist, so she specialised in ways to preserve women's fertility prior to cancer preservation or cancer treatment. So again, from her perspective, the question was about why is it that we are not looking to preserve women's fertility irrespective of cancer?
And so what would you say is, because I think that's a really common thing that you mentioned there, that a lot of women won't kind of go for help or even know that they need to seek help until you're there and you're at the precipice and then you're finding out that something's wrong with your fertility. What is kind of the journey, the woman's health journey that you see that actually needs to be occurring that's not happening right now?
I think women universally need to recognise that your hormones are not just for your fertility. I think the medical profession also needs to recognise that fact. Your hormones seem to be taken seriously when you've been trying to conceive for a certain amount of time. But what the failing in the medical profession is, I'll get shot for saying that, is not recognising that earlier preventative solutions can mean the difference between longer term implications health-wise. And but what I mean by that is that your hormones have an impact on your immune function, on your metabolic function, on your cardiovascular health, on your bone density, on your muscle mass. Your hormones impact so much more than just your fertility that it should be recognised that checking in on your hormones is vital, not just because you want to have a child, not simply because you are curious about your fertility. And I think that that's one of the things that we've built with Hertility, is something that is much more clinically robust, that is an assessment, not just to say, I'm going to check in on my egg reserve. That's a key indicator of your fertility, but it's not the only one. It's to say, how can I assess all of the vital parameters of my hormones that are going to impact me, like your thyroid health, like your all of the different facets of your overall health that might be implicating your fertility. So there's the story and the journey for us always became a bigger question than just, am I fertile? And that's what people should recognize, and that's what women need to start thinking about this way.
And so what are the biggest reproductive or even just general women's health issues that you're seeing because we're not going through that testing and checkups and all these things?
There's a huge economic burden caused by delayed diagnosis. If you look at the fact that 20% of the population have a thyroid issue, 1 in 10 have endometriosis, which can literally fuse your internal organs, and yet the average time for diagnosis for endometriosis is 9 years. One of the groundbreaking things, 9, that's the average time. So, and most people we talk to like, oh, it took 15 years to get an endometriosis diagnosis. And it's because it's sort of, down in your uterus is smushed in with all of your bowels and your other organs that can be then attributed to the pain. So it's, oh, you've got IBS or you've got some sort of inflammatory condition, and it's always attributed to something else. Up until now, endometriosis could only be diagnosed through open or laparoscopic surgery, and it takes on average 9 years. We can diagnose endometriosis with 99% diagnostic accuracy within 1 week, non-invasively. So that is a huge breakthrough in terms of a solution for an individual who will spend years trying to gain a diagnosis or gain an understanding of what is happening with their body.
And what does for the person sat at home who has endometriosis and is going through this process and it's taking all these years, what is the impact of knowing and getting that diagnosis within weeks versus within years?
I think it's much more than just one condition. So we can diagnose over 18 conditions within 1 week with 99% accuracy. That, for so many people, is a huge weight off their mind. But also it allows you to be able to conduct yourself in a way that future-proofs yourself. So with the knowledge that you will have about your potential condition, you know then about some of the risk factors that might implicate you, some of the things that might implicate your health from a metabolic perspective. Many of these conditions are metabolic conditions, so they are heavily impacted and influenced by what you eat. So I think getting an earlier diagnosis is huge. I think I went to an event once and a woman came up to me and she gave me a big hug and said, she hugged Helen and I, and she was like, I'm so happy I got a PCOS diagnosis through Hertility. We were like, sorry. And she's like, no, you don't understand how amazing this is for me to know it's not my fault. I'm constantly told I just need to lose weight, or I just need to do this other thing. And in actual fact, I now know that it is a metabolic condition that is responsible for the way I feel, the way I look, for the extra hair that is grown, for the extra weight in around the middle. It's the solution for many ways for this, for your mental state to know that it is attributable to something else.
I'm going to take you away from the conversation just for a second, because I know that a lot of healthcare professionals and clinicians listen in on these shows. And one thing that I hear time and time again from clinicians and even from consultants with over 10 years of experience is that they're finding it increasingly harder to be seen as an industry leader in their space. They see clinicians with a lot less experience getting the press mentions, getting the speaking opportunities, the advisory roles, and building other income streams. And a lot of them will tell us that they can't figure out why they're the ones that are being passed over and not chosen.
And the reason for this is because social media has completely changed the game for how patients and organisations now find and perceive who is an authority. It used to be that clinical excellence and publications automatically elevate your career. Tenure, seniority and titles carried authority. But today, the advisory roles, speaking opportunities and queues of private patients are all going to the top 1% of healthcare professionals who understand visibility.
Being excellent clinically is no longer enough. You also need to be visible. But the problem is that medical training does not teach you how to build a personal brand. You don't know which platform to focus on, what content works, or how to do this without looking unprofessional or burning out. And so a lot of clinicians will stay invisible while opportunities keep going to people who aren't necessarily better doctors, they're just more visible. And that's why we created a free online workshop specifically designed for healthcare professionals, where we'll teach you the exact system for building a credible personal brand that attracts opportunities and how to even monetize your online presence without spending hours per day on social media or compromising your professional reputation.
And this isn't theory. It's the exact playbook we've used to help dozens of healthcare professionals transform from invisible to influential in their fields.
Join the workshop via the link in the description of this episode. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the show. And I think as women, we're quite used to sort of, if you're experiencing pain or if anything is happening, you're quite used to just putting that at the back burner and not actually going out and seeking help. So who are at what stage, is it an age? At what stage are you actually meant to start caring about these things? At what stage are you meant to start seeking help, seeking, diagnosis, figuring out what is going on with your fertility? Because as you say, majority of people wait until they're trying to have a baby and then something happens and you find out.
I think if you're armed with the knowledge that 88% of your egg reserve is gone by the age of 30,
wow,
that 1 in 3 has a gynae condition, that thyroid function impacts 20%, that all of these different things can implicate your overall health, then it should be that you are proactive to wellness, not reactive to illness. And that's the mantra that we should have. It's all very fine wearing wearables and tracking your steps, but our key mantra is you should be tracking your ovaries over your calories, because they're going to be a much greater determinant of your overall well-being than your macros and micros. And I think that fortunately we're seeing an era of women who demand more. They expect more information about their bodies. But part of the problem is that now women are looking and seeking out more information, and that information from verified, credible people is not getting to them because of shadow banning, because of algorithmic suppression. But I think that if more people knew that they are not an outlier, they could be the 1 in 6 that's infertile. They could be the ones that have some reproductive condition. It is so much better to check in and be able to do something about it than to wait and hope and then leave yourself to a point where there is nothing that can be done about it.
And then out of curiosity, for some of these stats that you're saying, like 1 in 6 women are infertile.
Couples are infertile.
And what have you seen in the data? Do you have any understanding of why that is? Is that a result of our lifestyle, or is that actually just a natural?
There are many different causes of infertility, and one of the biggest factors that we are seeing is age-related fertility. So obviously there are huge factors that implicate, like reproductive health conditions, endocrine disrupting chemicals, our environment, but our age is one of the biggest determinants, and women are simply leaving it much later to have children than they ever were before. So, and if you look again at that 88% of your egg reserve is gone by the age of 30, then it's no wonder why, because at 30, everyone's now saying, YOLO, this is, I'm living my best life. Where before 30 was the age to settle down by.
Yeah. And what do you think that good hormonal health actually looks like?
Having hormones within range. So at least 72% of people who test with fertility have a hormone out of range. That might not sound like much, but if you look at your hormone system or your endocrine system as being like an orchestra, if there are 100 instruments playing and there's one bum note, you're going to hear the bum note. So similarly with your endocrine system, if there is one hormone out of range, you'll notice it with a symptom. So oftentimes the symptoms that we see are very insidious and they're very easy to attribute to something else. So fatigue, I stayed up too late, doom scrolling. Weight gain, I shouldn't have eaten Mackies on the weekend. Or, you know, the different things, anxiety, you know, work's just dorking me out. Like, there's so many different things that can be related to a hormone out of balance, but that we can also relate to something else. So that it's, again, to that thing that you've said about you can easily fob it off and you can self-blame or self-attribute a cause for. And equally, we're always conditioned to expect that pain is meant to be normal and that we're meant to expect that.
I mean, we speak to quite a few women's health GPs and things, and they kind of say a similar thing, that in the medical space as well, a lot of the time, if you come in and you're a woman with fatigue or something like this, it's immediately outsourced. It's like, oh, well, how's work going? All these external things are probably causing your issue.
Yeah.
But
they may be compounding. They may be adding to it.
Yeah.
But I think a thorough investigation is really important, which is why we ask a very detailed analysis. So in our health assessment alone, we've coded over 54,000 clinical scenarios so that we're taking into consideration menstrual patterns, lifestyle factors, nutrition, all of the things that might be implicating your health overall.
And then you also mentioned that you want to change the attitude towards reproductive health, hormonal health in the workplace.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
So I witnessed firsthand that albeit I have no reproductive health condition, I don't suffer with infertility. I have an ostensibly healthy reproductive system, and working 16, 17-hour days in a law firm, my reproductive system shut down and said no. When I wanted to try and have a baby, it said, no, you eat your breakfast at 4 p.m. You are incapable of nurturing yourself, let alone nurturing life. And so for me, the realization is that it's not just me going through it. It is every single woman questioning and wondering if I can have a baby. Should I have a baby? Do I even want to have a baby? And if so, and if yes to any of those, then when? And how do I fit it in? I've worked really hard on my career trajectory. How do I now park that and make that sacrifice? Because the workplaces, as long as there's this narrative that, you know, you just have to keep working through your fertile years, people will never feel like it is okay or safe to then just go and have a family. And that's one of the reasons why I object to this narrative that just says, just freeze your eggs or just have IVF, because it doesn't say, hey, don't worry, if you have family, we'll support you with that. We'll support you with the career break. We'll support you with the time you need off. We'll support you with childcare. It's just keep working. And put it off as long as you can. And I think that has devastating consequences.
And what do you think is the actual change that can occur? Because you mentioned there kind of like being more supportive around the space, but at the same time, I find it so difficult to imagine that companies will actually support that and create that change. And yet so many of, you know, my friends, like, they don't want to have children. They're putting that off, and that's why we're getting this later, you know, people having kids later in their 30s, and then the fertility issues come up, and it seems like a self-fulfilling cycle.
Yeah. So how I approach it within the workplace is that we've been sort of having conversations with workplaces for 5 years, I will say, maybe 4, where we're trying to let them know the cost of not managing reproductive health. So the cost of, instead of one company saying we'll pay £30,000 for one person to have IVF, why don't you pay £30,000 for your whole organisation to be screened so that no one needs IVF, hopefully. And I think that for me, the narrative about the need for earlier preventative diagnostic care, you know, clinical care afterwards, this hormonal lifespan of support that you would need at every life stage, that's really important. Getting on workplaces to understand that that isn't a cost is really difficult. So what we did, we built a reproductive health impact calculator, because if empathy doesn't get you, economics will. And the reality is nobody cares about anything other than their bottom line. And they can say, wow, it's fascinating. You can diagnose so many conditions. That's amazing. Really love what you're doing. Your mission is amazing. But ultimately, bottom line is impacted, it's going to cost us too much. And actually, it was only when we brought this impact calculator to show the cost of not dealing with it is costing your organisation more than dealing with it, then people started to wake up and say, okay, well, maybe we need to start taking this into into bigger hands, and we need to start implementing this as a benefit. So we've rolled out as a benefit with a load of different corporates, with one insurer, and it's really important. It's really amazing to see the impact in the workplace. It's really great to see that sort of, when a workplace supports people to say, I can check in, it impacts absenteeism, presenteeism, turnover. People feel grateful. People get the help they need sooner. Even within our own workplace, we provide all of the benefits. So we provide our benefits are diagnostic testing, clinical consultations with gynecologists or fertility advisors or menopause experts or nutrition experts, plus a pelvic ultrasound. So there's a full suite of clinical services that we provide for. But within our own workforce, we've seen firsthand, there was someone who had discovered no symptoms, by the way, but discovered that she had a 13 centimeter cyst on her ovary, which if left undetected would have had devastating consequences for her health, let alone her reproductive health. And there's been a few examples of people in their 20s who've discovered that they're in primary ovarian insufficiency, which basically means they're in menopause in their 20s. Their egg reserve is very low. So we've been able to sort of intervene, go through an egg freezing route, where typically if they had worked anywhere else, they would have left it till their 30s, and then by then it would have been too late.
And so you mentioned quite a few conditions there, and I haven't even heard of some of these. Are these all common conditions?
I think the thing is, primary ovarian insufficiency, correct me, it may be wrong here, but I think it's 1 in 100.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not common, but it's not insignificant.
Yeah.
And if I thought that there's a 1% chance that I might be infertile in my 20s,
yeah, I'd want to know.
I'd want to know.
Yeah.
And the reality is that even if it isn't complete, you're at varying different stages. There's so many examples of women that have discovered this. Were it not for fertility, they would have waited, as everyone does. This wait and see model, I can't understand how in a world where we have data and AI and technology at our fingertips, but the solution for our health is just wait and see.
Yeah. And we get actually quite a lot of business owners and kind of founders, CEOs listening to this show. So you mentioned there the economic kind of effect of not having the fertility as part or doing the diagnostics. Do you have an example of, for example, if you have a woman who's one of your employees in the workplace, if she doesn't get that diagnosis and later down the line something happens, how much does that actually cost in real terms?
So the calculator allows you to input the number of employees that are in the organization, how many are female, what is the likely percentage of them who will have a reproductive condition, breaking down into the conditions like PCOS or endometriosis, and looking at the example of infertility, for example. So supposing someone doesn't check in early, and therefore they don't know that they have a lower ovarian reserve, and therefore they leave it later, and therefore they need to go through multiple rounds of IVF, potentially unsuccessfully. The impact on that individual in terms of their absenteeism, so they're at work but they're not paying attention to anything other than the fact that all they're desperate to do is try to conceive, and that they have to go through multiple injections, and they have to go through this egg stimulation process, and this whole medical intervention that is distracting both them and their partner, and they have to go through that process because there wasn't an earlier intervention that might have meant an earlier success metric. There's the distraction of something like a condition like pain that impacts you, that could be prevented if you had an earlier diagnosis. So even if you look at endometriosis, you could prevent someone having multiple exploratory surgeries. So the cost to an organization and to that person's well-being of missing work, of having to go to hospital, of having to go to hundreds of appointments, having to be bounced here, there, and everywhere, even down to the economics of the test that we provide that you can do in your home. It's 3 appointments in one. If you wanted to typically go to get these tests on the National Health System, they won't do them. They won't do the breadth of testing in any respect. In a private fertility clinic, you would have to go to the clinic. You then go somewhere else for your bloods at a different date. You go back for your results to be interpreted to you. You don't actually get a full suite of this clinical interpretation given to you, because you're never really given that autonomy to know that you actually should be able to understand. You should be fertility fluent. And I think that the time saving of our test being 3 appointments in one, you haven't left your home. and we've tested up to 10 different hormones. As opposed to at a clinic, they might test 1, if not 2 hormones, that's it. But they will charge you 10 times as much. So thousands of pounds for those 2, and you've had 3 different appointments. So even again, in the cost to the individual, the cost of time is our greatest commodity. And then if you're here, there and everywhere traipsing, because they have to be timed on the right day, you have to do the tests on the 3rd day of your cycle. So there's a cost implication, there's a time implication, and that impacts you from a personal perspective, but it impacts a workplace, it impacts economies through delayed diagnosis, and the impact of all this hospital time and care and mismanagement of patients.
And how early in how early in your life do you kind of advocate for women to start checking in their hormones and actually doing these tests?
I think that firstly, your intuition is so strong. So when we ask in the health assessment, have you ever been diagnosed with something? Yes, no, I've never been diagnosed, but I think something's up.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, spot on. There is something up. There's a hormone out of range. There's a diagnosis that's there that we've been able to provide. And it just goes to show that gut instinct that women, they know what their own bodies, they know when something's up.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the greatest callings to suggest that you should check in if you feel like something's up. If you have painful periods, heavy periods, irregular periods, your periods are your 6th vital sign. You know, the World Health Organization stated that your periods is your 6th vital sign, along with your pulse and your heart rate and your breathing, all of these different facets. Your period health is a really key indicator. So I think the earlier it will be is dependent on the symptoms you might notice.
Yeah.
But I am a huge believer that we should all be tracking our egg reserve decline, because our rate of individual egg reserve decline is dependent on our genetics, on our background, on our ethnicity, on our exposures. And so I think annual testing is really key from at least, I would go as early as sort of like early 20s. And then the cadence of testing could be maybe twice a year after 35.
And then, so you mentioned a stat, and I want to get this right. So you said that closing the health gap would result in 137 million women re-entering employment by 2040. Was
that my stat?
I think I saw it
something.
in a LinkedIn post.
That's come from something. I can't remember where.
So why is this the case? Why would so many women be re-entering employment?
Okay, so if you think about the fact that fertility is a huge issue, fertility and that the cost and the time of and the impact of going through a fertility journey. Something like IVF is incredibly invasive, physiologically, psychologically, biologically, financially, and it's on the person as well as everyone who is around them. If you can close the gender health gap by getting people earlier diagnostics, earlier healthcare, more streamlined provision of care, then you can allow people to live their lives normally. You're allowing them to say, one of the examples is endometriosis or PCOS, where people are impacted so much in the workplace that oftentimes they feel like they aren't supported in their workplace. They feel like they need to leave because they have much time off work, because they have something that isn't diagnosed or something that isn't being treated for.
Yeah.
But equally, menopause, 1 million people leave the workplace every year because of menopause. And I'll guarantee it's higher because, for the most part, people are leaving because they can't cope with symptoms or they're not supported with those symptoms. And that could be perimenopause as well, where it's impacting you much earlier. And I think that if you're in the prime of your mental and professional acumen, you are a subject matter expert, but you're being forced out of the workplace simply because you're unsupported or you can't cope with the work conditions around you, that has a very big cost significance to a workplace in trying to replace those level of connections, that level of intellect, that level of prowess with a professional context. So there's that turnover aspect, there's the absenteeism aspect, and the presenteeism aspect, where someone is at work and they're typing, but they're not really doing anything. So the combined forces of absenteeism, presenteeism, and turnover really mean that if you're supporting this and diagnosing things or treating things much earlier, and finding a solution for people much earlier, the re-entry into the workplace is much greater.
Yeah, and I think there's maybe a bit of a thought process, which is that there's no solution. You know, that you just have to leave if you're dealing with these issues. That there's no way that you know, we can support women or the company can support women. What is like the solution there? How do you support women through these changes?
The thing that is really important and what we do within workplaces is educate. So we run CPD accredited educational seminars because part of the whole issue is the lack of awareness and the lack of understanding. And it is not just from the male counterpart perspective or managerial perspective. It is from the personal perspective of so many people. It always amazes me how intelligent so many women are, and yet they are completely blinded to their own reproductive physiology and anatomy and the basic functions of their body. So we do really intensive education seminars, which are very well received, and I think that it's the men in the workforce are oftentimes the ones who learn the most. But that's a really key feature to understand how to recognize symptoms, how to cope with them, how to manage them from the top down. But equally, that sort of having a streamlined solution. If someone has a condition and is bandied around by a healthcare system that doesn't prioritize their health or doesn't have the adequate solutions or clinical care to prioritize their health, then someone taking 9 years to get a diagnosis or 4 to 8 years for PCOS, that's a huge burden on the individual. That's a huge burden on the workplace. So I think that streamlined clinical care, giving someone answers in days, not years, makes a huge difference to the workplace. And also then providing the next steps, because it's all very fine giving someone a diagnosis, but you need to be able to give them the next steps. You need to be able to say, well, now what do you do with the diagnosis? What do you do with that information? And that's why we've worked so hard to put together the full suite of clinical services, the full suite of solutions, irrespective of someone's outcome, whether someone has hormonal acne or someone has had multiple baby loss. That solution sort of for next care and next steps has to be there.
And then on the front of kind of education and going back to the basics, so I've mentioned the gender health gap, you've mentioned it. What is the gender health gap?
So the gender health gap is the fundamental and systemic differences between healthcare solutions and outcomes and diagnosis times between men and women. It is when a woman presents at hospital and a man presents at hospital, what their solutions and options provided to them are going to be. Will they be taken seriously? Will they be turned away? Will they be told it's anxiety or sleep deprivation? More often than not, a woman will be told that it is anxiety or sleep deprivation, then it is something serious or more sinister. And part of the reason for that is that it's for years, the data that has been aggregated in respect of diagnostics and information to gain a solution or gain a diagnosis for someone has been taken on a Caucasian male. And so it doesn't take into consideration the differentials of body dimensions, of ethnicities, of genetics. It is very much, this is the cookie cutter. The textbook definition of a condition is this plus this plus this, even though for a woman it could be completely different. And so the gender gap relates to the fact that there are over 700 diseases and conditions diagnosed later for women than men.
Yeah. And then bringing that really back down to kind of base level. So what does that mean, for example, for, a woman, Sally, late 20s? What does that mean for her? So she's going through, the healthcare system. Maybe she's going to go, something's wrong. She's going to go get a diagnosis. What does that mean?
I think the greatest examples that we see and the things that we hear the most often is that women feel gaslit. They're told the pain is in their head, the pain is normal, they are too emotional, too hormonal, that it's meant to be part of their physiology as a woman. And I think that the comparison then for a male counterpart will be that they are taken more seriously, that they are not questioned, with their authority is not questioned. If they say that they have something, they're generally believed, whereas women are told that they need to speak to someone, that they need psychiatric help, that they need to, that they basically are overreacting. And it's one of the reasons why we have this phrase, you're not overreacting, because our symptoms are real, our pain is valid, we deserve to be listened to, and it shouldn't be that the clinical default is to say you're probably fine.
And so then moving on to fertility. So what is the full scope of everything that fertility does? Because we mentioned fertility, reproductive health, kind of menopause, hormonal health.
Hertility was built out of a need for personalised preventative healthcare across a woman's hormonal lifespan. So serving women at every stage of their hormonal journey, and that changes as we grow older, from gynecological conditions to period health to pre-pregnancy and fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, menopause. That's your whole life. And so instead of viewing our health in single life stages, fertility and menopause, we wanted to be able to bridge the gap to say women deserve accessible, personalised healthcare across every life stage, irrespective of what their life goals are, irrespective of family planning goals. Our hormonal health is something that should be taken seriously. And so Hertility was built to be able to provide diagnostic solutions with real clinical acumen for individual women, personalizing it to them, listening to them, listening to their needs, listening to their desires, listening to their medical history, and being able to then diagnose them for over 18 different conditions within 1 week with 99% accuracy, but then also provide a full suite of clinical services, online consultations, nutritionists, menopause experts, you name it. We've got a gynecologist or an endocrine specialist to be able to serve that woman irrespective of her life journey.
And then for you personally, so you came from a legal background. So when you first started Hertility, how was that journey? And did you always know that you wanted to end up in healthcare? How did you end up coming into the entrepreneurship world, going directly from law?
I did a master's in medical law because I thought if I'm not going to be a doctor, I'm going to defend doctors. I have a family of doctors and parents of doctors, and I think that that has always been an interest of mine. Clinical negligence is quite dark, though. I did that for a good few years and then realised that it's just not where I want to be because it's not really effectively helping people. So I think I always wanted to be in healthcare in some capacity. I didn't think that I would be in it in this capacity. I never sought to start my own company. I would never put myself in this position. I always thought I would be a lawyer and down to the end, and I still am. And I think it's probably the greatest attribute you can have as a founder is also having that sort of legal background. It's incredibly helpful.
And what has been the most beneficial thing? Like, what have been the skills from your legal background that you've carried through that have helped the most with Hertility?
Venture capital is complex. Corporate law is complex. Commercial law is complex. And I think that having subject matter expertise in each of those facets is really helpful when it comes to scaling, raising money, and knowing what's right for the company.
Yeah. And then what would you say did you find it challenging nonetheless going from corporate law to suddenly being in the world of kind of entrepreneurship? And
no, I actually think that sort of almost military-like training to work 16, 17-hour days, work weekends, work no matter what, that is the best possible preparation you could have for a startup. Because I think when people say I think I'm gonna go out on my own and have a startup, I'm always like, are you sure? You sure you want to do that? Do you love it? Because unless you absolutely love it, you're not going to survive. I met a founder who was like, I've been trying to raise money for 9 months. I'm so over it. And I was like, honey, you're in the wrong game. You're already over it.
And so then when you were starting off, what were kind of the most challenging things that you did go through?
I think navigating all of the regulations that are required, navigating them not just once for what was then Europe, which included the UK, but then having to navigate them then through Brexit. So we are the most regulated company in this space. It's almost like we wear it as our badge of honor that we have gone PhD level on our startup. There was one thing that I never wanted to be any question around, which was our regulatory background, that we had always had the upper echelon of every form of regulatory and compliance and quality control that was that could be existing within a company, alongside clinical acumen. So for us navigating the regulatory world, then making sure that it is constantly up to date, making sure data is secure. It's a minefield, and it's quite scary, but you cannot mess it up. You cannot ever risk having any issue with your regulatory capacity or your regulatory acumen or your data protection. It has to be bulletproof. And so that from the beginning has been a real core mission and objective of ours, is to make sure that that is bulletproof.
And how did you create the team? Because so you have two other co-founders.
Yeah.
How did you know that they were the right two people for you to work with?
I didn't exactly pick my twin sister. We kind of found each other.
We picked her as a co-founder.
I think she picked me, actually. I'm quite bullish, and I felt like I pushed her into this in lots of ways and lots of times. And same with Natalie. Natalie is kind of one of these people who is really good at the parts that we are not good at. You know, the things like setting up bank accounts, dealing with labs and logistics, and, you know, all of those parts are really important. So it works really well when your twin sister is your co-founder. You have each other's back no matter what. And we also have such separate skill lanes that we don't cross into each other's lanes. We don't butt heads. I know that she is the very best at what she does, and she knows the same about me in terms of and that level of trust that we have, and that level of ability to just let someone run in their own lane is really powerful. And I think Natalie is a real mediator. She works really well with both of us, which is quite rare. If you're going to have identical twin sisters, everyone thinks that it'd be really hard to be the other guy. And actually, she sides with one or other of us, and we've kind of a 3 out of, or a 1 or 2 out of 3 rule where kind of we veto.
And then, I mean, you've nearly had 7 years of running Hertility. What do you know now that you would have kind of wanted to have known, you know, those 7 years ago?
I suppose because of my venture capital background, I thought the be all and end all was getting institutional investment.
Yeah.
If I could go back, I would have avoided that for as long as possible. I would have just gotten grant funding, and I would have applied for as many as possible. I think that that's one of the things that I look back on and say that would have been a much more beneficial route. I think the other things are just trusting the understanding of things like tech and products. There's just worlds you couldn't possibly understand if you've never dealt with them. And I think I was quite naive with them to begin with. In some things, feeling like we didn't need certain facets of the business, probably because I just didn't understand them, and I was wrong with that.
And why do you say the point about the grants?
Because grant money is free money. It's non-dilutive. And I think that it comes with not only a non-dilutive element, but it also comes with a level of kudos, because it's quite difficult. Now, we've applied for grants and we've gotten many grants, but there were so many more kind of out there for the taking, instead of constantly feasting on punitive money, which is venture money.
And then how did you know? So you would have seen the the huge market gap with the women's health and all these things going wrong. But how did you know this was the right business idea? Because I think it sounds like you kind of pushed your sister into this, and this was very much initiated with yourself.
I have never had any question in my mind ever about how needed this is. I've never doubted about whether or not we should do it. I've never wavered for even a minute. I've said, my God, this is tough. I've cried my eyes out. I've screamed and shouted and been angry, but I've never once questioned whether it was a good idea. I never once thought, are we doing the right thing? Because it is so fundamentally needed that more often people say, surely this already exists, than people say, should this even exist? So I think that for me is the one sort of North Star I have, is that people need this. Wherever we go, we hear from women to say how grateful they are, or how thankful they are, or how happy they are that we existed, or how much they wish we existed when they were trying to have children, or when they were going through multiple rounds of IVF, or when they were struggling to conceive. So, it's just needed.
And then you mentioned the doubts there. What were the scariest moments, or the doubts that you did have? What were the kind of most challenging, maybe personal moments that over the past nearly 7 years?
So I have a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Wow.
I never had the luxury of maternity leave. because, and same with Helen, who's got 2 children as well. When you have your own company, you can't stop.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to get to the moon as quickly as you can't stop and fill up the petrol tank, you know. And I think that that's part of the reason why I always say that fertility is like woven into my inner fabric, and that if someone pulls a thread, it unravels me. It isn't just, oh, this is a company. This is my other baby. This is something that when you know, at the time I remember you saying, like, I have a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old company. And it's really hard. It's really exhausting to be able to try and work through regulations, to work through fundraising, to work through growing a company, growing a team, but also growing a human being. And then feeding that baby and through the night and doing every work feed. And one of those things that people always say when you have a baby is like, nap when they nap. And every time I would think, I wish I could nap. I wish I could do, but instead it would be when they slept, I worked. And it was this constant, you know, almost a symbiotic relationship that you know, you have to be able to keep them with you, and that you want that so much, but you're also so embedded in this need to help people to do the thing you've just done. You know, that makes it more real. I said, no one should ever miss out on this. No one should ever miss the opportunity to do this if they want to. And so that's the kind of one of the hardest challenges, is that divide of personal care, non-existent, baby care, and then company care. It's really hard to balance it out. And, you know, oftentimes, I remember a friend of mine saying to me, Dee, how close to burnout are you? And I was like, dust, ashes. But you can't set fire to ashes. So that was kind of my mantra, is like, you know, no one's glorifying burnout these days, but it exists, and it's unavoidable in startup culture. It's unavoidable.
So what's the mindset? What's the background that I need to understand about you to see how you got to this stage where because this is something like I've thought a lot of times, I love my business so much, and I thought a lot of times I can't have children until like this gets to a point where it's self-sufficient and everything's going on.
But you can. And that's the biggest misconception, is that it's either or. And that's not to say you can have both and it will be easy. No, you have to choose your heart. And I think one of the things that I even realized with having my second very close to my first, there's only 16 months between them, is that having a baby, 2 babies, 2 under 2 is hard. Going through infertility is harder. Choose your heart. And choosing the heart is one of the biggest things that women need to recognize, is that it isn't going to be easy. And pick one and then it'll be easy, or pick one and then you'll be successful. Both are going to be hard. One may be harder. And I think choosing your heart is the biggest thing you need to recognize. You have a business, you want to run it, but you also want to have a family. And it shouldn't come that you get to your point in your mid-40s and you say, God, I wish I'd just taken a break. I wish I'd just had a baby. I wish I'd just taken a step away and said, I can do both. Not at 110%. Because something will impact you, you know. But oftentimes I say that we've built fertility to the stage that it's at because of having children, not in spite of them. Sure, we might be doing different things, but our happiness levels would be completely different. Our objectives would be completely different. It's that prioritization of what is really important in life.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, because I think we hear, I hear the narrative really, really often of focus on your career. And then once your career is good and you've got this to like a certain point, that's when you go and you can have the children. Then you take the time fully off. And it doesn't, was that ever a thought process for you, or were you always set like this?
The biggest misconception is that you can just wait. And I think that that's part of the biggest key in emancipating women, to check in. It kind of gives you at least an idea to say, well, I know where my egg reserve is. I know where I stand from a reproductive health standpoint. I know how much time I ostensibly may have, roughly. And that, I think, is one of the biggest key things, is check in so that you know, don't leave it to guesswork. Don't assume that you're not 1 in 6. Don't assume that you're not going to be implicated somehow.
And then you mentioned burnout and kind of this keeping the motivation going and all of these things. What do you think, and maybe I can tell what your answer will be, but what do you think is has been your motivation? How have you maintained such a strong kind of grip on carrying on and being able to manage so many things?
I think that what we're doing transcends so much. Women have been neglected for generations. They have been denied access to information about their bodies. They have been told certain things about their body that simply do not exist. And I think the importance of educating women, the importance of helping women, the importance of giving them real information, that is this really driving force. But ultimately, for me, and I know so many women don't want to have children, for me, having 2 children is the greatest gift I was ever given. No amount of career success will ever match the joy that I get from those little arms going around my neck or the little hand on my face in the night. There's nothing that could surpass that. And oftentimes I think that this growing narrative to say, I don't want to have children, that's fine. That applies to so many people. They may not want children. But for some people, I think that it's like saying, I never want to listen to music again. But then you hear this song and you want to dance, and that music is the thing that takes over your whole body. That is, for me, what it is like to say, I don't want to have children, but you've never heard the song. You've never heard the music, and you don't know how it's going to make you dance or sing. And so to deny that possibility to people by a system that neglects them is something that I want to see overcome. I don't want anyone to not dance when they could dance. And there's a choice. You can choose to not listen to music. That's perfect. But I think that if you have the ability to help your own health and provide solutions for generations to come, then that is something I will work until I am dust.
That's amazing. And how has the business changed your perspective on, I guess, life, home life? I mean, what's the biggest perspective shift that you've had since founding Hertility?
I think because I come from a very educated background, a very medical background, my assumption levels on people's knowledge or their innate knowledge about themselves is flawed. People actually have very little understanding about their own biology, about their own systems. And I think for me, that since starting Hertility, I think the growing awareness, like we did an assessment with Google, and they told us the number one search term in relation to fertility isn't what is adenomyosis, it isn't what is this endometriosis, it is what is fertility. That will tell you. That's the number one search term that people have, is what is fertility. And so for me, the recognition of the lack of awareness is a huge part, but equally the prevalence of conditions, the things that are impacting us, the things that impact our hormones, the endocrine disrupting chemicals, it's the acrylic nails or the candles or the cosmetics. It's all of that surround us that impacts our hormonal system. And I think that it's had a very big impact in how I live my life, the food I eat, the things I put in my home, the things I wash my clothes with, the clothes that I wear and the fabrics. All of it has an impact on your endocrine system. And so I suppose since starting, I've gained my own awareness. Helen is the greatest teacher. She's a tenured professor, and so having your own twin sister be a professor is amazing, because she has taught me so much. We do lots of education seminars and webinars, and I listen to her webinars as if I'm a student. I listen and I learn something new every time. So, I encourage people to go and listen to those, because if I've been listening to her since in utero, and I'm learning things still, then people have a lot to learn.
So the acrylic nails, that's a really shocking one. So things like this will have an impact on your hormones, on your fertility.
Yeah.
Acrylic nails make you infertile.
Yeah. No. They have an impact on your endocrine system. So there are what's called endocrine disrupting chemicals, which are your creams, your cosmetics, your candles, and this is something I've learned from Helen. And those are the things that are going to impact your endocrine system, your hormones.
I've never.
There's been a latest paper based on acrylic nails, so don't do it.
So how are you getting this information out to more people? Like, how are you spreading that awareness?
It's a real frustration that we have because we try and educate people through where they are. People are doom scrolling.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
try and get to people's feeds. We try and do educational seminars. We put educational content online. We go to businesses and workplaces and give seminars and education sessions. And we also have a full blog. So we have Knowledge Centre that we filled, and we've got a full all-female research team. So we're constantly talking the talk to educate people and getting people to become fertility fluent, get them to educate themselves. But we're consistently seeing blocks. So there was a recent webinar that we tried to do about PCOS, and someone said that they tried to join the webinar, but Sky had blocked them from watching it because they thought it was inappropriate content or adult content, even though she was a 31-year-old woman, that had blocked adult content. So this is a tenured professor at a leading university giving an educational webinar about polycystic ovary syndrome, which impacts 1 in 10 women, and yet it's deemed to be sensitive or inappropriate adult content that is censored even by the sort of the channels that it's put through. So there's a growing censorship and block, whether it's through any medium, but particularly through Meta and now LinkedIn and Google, where women's health has had a huge shutdown, into whether it's by shadow banning or overt censorship.
And why do you think that is?
I have my theories about presidential people that exist that might be contributing somehow.
But what would be the intention there?
There's something very sinister happening when we're looking to deny 50% of the planet information about their bodies.
Yeah.
When a woman's body can be viewed online only when it is sexualized. That you can view the most graphic pornographic content about a woman, but you cannot view anatomically correct information about her reproductive health or about her overall health. There's a really dark movement that is some sort of dystopian nightmare that is a reality that is hitting our technology systems and the things that we all rely on, that is blocking information. I don't know why it's there. I don't know why it is seen to be appropriate to block this information, because no one is protected by this, especially when we should be looking to protect our children online. We should be looking to protect women from being exploited online. And yet the focus is on, let's look to protect women from themselves, protect women from the education that they so vitally need.
Because this is the most confusing thing as well, because you look where the money is, right? But then Meta, what do they gain from blocking an ad? They don't gain anything.
They lose revenue.
Exactly.
They lose revenue. It is honestly economically reckless to allow this level of censorship, because you're blocking businesses from thriving. You're blocking women from access to information. So if there's currently 760,000 women on wait lists in the UK to see a gynecologist, and you can guarantee there's double that who actually need to see someone, but they've been turned away and told that their pain is normal, or that it's not important, or that it's in their head. There's be twice as many people who actually need to see healthcare professional, and yet that bottleneck in the system has downstream impacts and implications. The healthcare system is so overstretched and overburdened that it's costing trillions just by not dealing with healthcare issues earlier in a preventative, personalised way, by not providing the solution we have. We calculated that we could save global authorities between 8 and 10 trillion simply by inputting our diagnostic solution and clinical pathways. 8 to 10 trillion. And yet the McKinsey report is, it's about 1 trillion. No, it's 10x that, because of all of the implicating factors of your overall health, not just fertility. And so by blocking these channels, I don't see what the value is. I don't see how we're protecting women. I don't see how they're protecting themselves. I think part of the biggest reason for this blanket shutdown was that the period tracking app Flow Health had a massive data breach, and they sold women's health and period information to multiple organisations. And each of these organisations then got a slap on the wrist, 56 million in fines, and Meta got a big fine. And it's like Meta said, oh no, someone had a dirty glass of water. we should shut the entire water system off. And like they shut the water system off and people said, but we need to flush toilets, but we need to have hospitals run. And they went, no, let's lock that door. We've shut that pipe off, without the foresight to think, because one dirty company sold women's information, that we should then close off the information for all women's health companies. You know, we're paying the wrath of a massive fuck up by one company, by Flow, and everyone is now implicated. That's my view. My theory is that they decided they don't want another slap on the wrist. They don't want to risk it. So it doesn't matter how clinically validated you are, that we've done 22 clinical trials, that we've done every kind of regulatory standpoint to protect people and protect women and protect our users. They've turned off the water supply.
And what are the types of things that are being censored?
Everything. The word fertility, the word endometriosis.
In ads. So if you say fertility, it's blocked.
It's blocked.
Wow.
We have one story of a woman who just tells about how she took 10 years to get her diagnosis, that she assumed that her pain was so severe that childbirth was the same as her monthly pain. And she just thought that was normal. It was only when she talked to her friends that she realised actually that's not normal. Wasn't selling. It wasn't advocating for our services. It wasn't even mentioning Hertility. It was just her storytelling.
It was a video of her saying this.
And Meta removed it and said it was too political.
And do you see the same censorship for men's health?
No.
Men's fertility?
No. You can have the most crude and crass and vile advertising when it comes to men's health. Got moobs? There's an advert of a man literally circling his nipple. Can you imagine you put a woman's nipple online and it's fine? It's
people go crazy.
Could be your hormones, but the equivalent of symptoms for some reproductive health condition for a woman is blocked and deemed inappropriate. Similarly, all manner of adverts in relation to erectile dysfunction fly freely. You can access, a man can access a woman's OnlyFans. Open up his Instagram and it's someone's legs akimbo, it's someone's bent over something, and that's absolutely fine. But when it comes to something like a diagnosable condition, or even just awareness about something that impacts so much of the planet, especially when the falling birth rates are so severe. We're on the third year in a row where the UK's birth rates are the lowest on record.
And I really want to drive this point in. What are the specific, are there any other ads or any other examples that you can give of the specific situations in which your content or ads have been blocked?
Our ads are always very tasteful. They're always quite witty. We try and get people to see the relatable side of their health without it being sort of something that makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So we say, give yourself a standing ovulation or public cervix announcement. And it's oftentimes armed with something that says knowledge is power. Learning about your reproductive health might impact your overall health. It is very subtle, key information that encourages people to learn about their own reproductive health or learn about their hormones. All of that is blocked. We don't even have the opportunity to test things anymore. Anything, even in terms of storytelling about trying to warn people about the 10 years that they could avoid in misdiagnosis, that is all blocked. And then comparable examples for male health fly freely through. So it could be a picture of a floppy aubergine. It could be a picture of, it could be something saying, oftentimes actually, even in terms of testing, it's always relating to sex. Like your hormones, the only thing that matters with your hormones is if you can't get it up, or if your partner doesn't want to have sex with you, let alone the conditions that might impact your overall health and mean you die earlier, mean you have multiple surgeries. There's a real misalignment between what is allowed versus what isn't allowed. And it seems to be, if they're going to block information on healthcare, if they're going to say we don't want healthcare online, then there shouldn't be a permissive allowance for most of the non-clinical healthcare content creators that exist out there spreading theories. It should be that, okay, if you want to produce content in relation to healthcare, show us your healthcare certificate, show us your regulations. So that's what we're advocating for, is to say, we understand that there should be some safety around the content that is delivered. But that safety should be met by the fact that you have world-leading experts delivering it, and that you have the regulatory capacity to showcase that you are legitimate, rather than countless people who are completely illegitimate content health creators, or the countless information that is unverified.
Yeah, I mean, we work with actually quite a lot of clinicians and doctors, helping them, create content, build out thought leadership online, and that's exactly the problem. A lot of them are really scared because of the regulation boards and what they're allowed to say, what they're not allowed to say, and this is the craziest contradiction that we always see, because then you have some influencer who is promoting lemon water to fix all of your problems, and there's zero regulation, which is insane.
Yeah, it's there's something not working in the corporate governance on the policy application within these organizations.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that needs to be tackled. Because if you're going to say you can't provide health advice online, it needs to be a blanket approach for everyone. It cannot be that it is only in relation to one sex.
Yeah. I mean, it feels quite dystopian, actually, hearing how much censorship, how much you're being censored and how much you've had to go through. It kind of feels like one of these things that in 10 years, everyone's going to look back and just think this is insane.
Everyone looks at this and says it's insane now. And yet we don't seem to be able to penetrate the powers that be, because you never speak to the people who make the decision. And so, like, even the account managers, it's out of their control. And when you look to have information to say, well, point us, what are the guidelines? What are the policies? How do we fit within this framework that has been constructed? But no one knows what the framework even looks like. It's this very nebulous, ethereal concept that doesn't even allow you to navigate it. It's just the door is closed.
So have you ever received a public response or any explanation for why you're getting banned in certain other ads, for example, for men's health, or not?
No explanation as to why we are and they aren't. No clarity, no transparency. It is completely occluded. And that's the frustrating thing, is because I want to work to a solution. If there's a problem, I want to navigate it. If the door is closed, let's burrow. If the windows are closed, let's find another way around. Let's get down that chimney. But it is just like, the building's on fire, don't go near it. That's the kind of the approach. And I think that is so crazy to think that there are businesses literally just going out of business. There are companies going out of business simply because they can't reach people.
Yeah, and so beyond even just, the awareness from a business perspective, that's debilitating. So how have you been able to, because you mentioned there, if the windows are closed, go around, how have you been able to actually go around these things and still, create business, find customers, spread awareness?
It's really hard. It's really hard to reach people now, because that's where they are. They're online. So, we can do webinars and seminars, and we can try and do billboard campaigns, but you just can't be certain that they're your audience, that you're reaching the right people. So it's a constant battle for us. And I think it's something that it's only going to become harder. And it's something that I've been doing an awful lot of research, even as a lawyer, in to try and figure out, how do we navigate this? How do we overcome this big door being shut in our face? And I think there's a part of it that says, this is why we need to be speaking out loud online. This is why we need to be imploring people to speak out, people to reshare, people to talk about this, to try and say this is nonsensical. This is, if you're not just doing it for yourselves, do it for your daughters, do it for your mother, your sisters, your aunts, your wife, your spouse, whoever it is in your life. It is so important that this is seen as an economic issue that impacts everyone. This isn't women's health issues. This isn't girls' problems. This is a huge, huge economic crisis that we're facing if it isn't dealt with.
And so for anybody listening to this who does want to help, or at least in some way, spread the message or get past this, what can they actually physically do?
Join the reproductive revolution. I think following us, supporting things, the talking about us, bringing us into your workplace, asking your HR leaders about seminars that can be done, or benefits that we can provide. If we can't get to people to try and use our services or educate themselves, then going into workplaces is one of the greatest ways, because that's where women are. That's where they are for their reproductive lifespan. And I think go to their workplace, advocate for this as being a benefit within their workplace. It's one of the greatest things, and supporting things online, speaking up about it.
And then, is this an issue that I assume this is an issue that you've actually faced since day one?
So this has been an issue there's articles spanning back over 4 years on this. It's not something that we saw so it's you know, we always wondered why we never saw virality for some of our campaigns, that they were so brilliant that we never saw that reach which we would have expected. And now I know that shadow banning has been existent for a very long time. But particularly from February 14th, we saw that there was a distinct rule change. We got zucked over. And that, since February 14 is when we really noticed the difference between traffic and reach and awareness, because it was that kind of shutting the tap off.
And so at the really start, how were you finding your first customers? Out of curiosity.
I think online has always been a really big one for us through social media. It's where people are. It's kind of Instagram and LinkedIn. We've struggled with TikTok because the content that we have, it's not clickbaity, it's not goofy or quick. It is more serious. It has integrity. It has weight, and you don't really get that 3 nanoseconds of attention for someone that you would do, or that people seek on TikTok.
You know, actually, interestingly, we worked with a menopause specialist at one point, and this is when we kind of first also saw how big of an issue the women's health space and lack of information was, because we released one video of her speaking on PMDD, and it hit 5 million views, and every single comment was women saying, I never even knew that this was a condition. So that completely speaks to your entire point, which is that, and they were asking, where do I get help? I thought there was something wrong with me, and it's all of these things, these comments start coming through, and you start thinking this is real people at the other side that have lived with this for their entire life and have never even known.
Yeah.
And that is debilitating.
Yeah.
What are some of the kind of stories that you've had, and the people that you've worked with, how much their life has been changed as a result of fertility?
One of my favorite is some of the messages that we receive. So one of them is fertility, the reason I'm holding my baby boy.
Wow.
Or fertility, the reason that I have my little girl. Like they're the kind of things that make you stop in your tracks and say that there is life created as a result of some solution that we've been able to provide someone. Because that, to me, is the greatest, KPI, is the life metric that people can say, I have another form of life because of this journey I took. But a lot of the stories, I think, in relation to that ability to earlier diagnose or catch primary ovarian insufficiency, or catch something that would have been truly devastating, those are the ones where you know that they flew very close to the sun and they didn't know it. So I think the stories for me that sit home are the ones where we have a fertility hatchling at the end of it, and the ones that someone has gotten something that we've been able to intervene, which they wouldn't have had any ability to intervene on.
And on a slightly different, so interestingly, you run your business with your co-founder is your twin sister, and another person. So how have you found that? You mentioned that you actually work very well together. And you also mentioned that you actually didn't think that you would go into entrepreneurship and things. How, when you first started Hertility, did you know that you would be good at working together? Like, how was the initial first few years?
To begin with, because I was so busy in Cooley, my twin sister was trying to get my attention. It's one of the reasons why I realized that I needed to change. But she was trying to get my attention because she was trying to tell me she was pregnant. So when we started, she was pregnant.
Wow.
And I was too busy. I didn't make time for her. I was always like outside the firm being like, oh, how long is this going to take? And she didn't tell me for a very long time, simply because I didn't give her the time. And it was too big a deal to be saying something in passing outside, standing outside a law firm. And so we've always been in such different fields. We've never had to work together. But there is a synchronicity when you have a twin in terms of your expectations, your work ethic, your belief system, that really guides and navigates us. And I think that for us, the kind of integrity and the reputation of ourselves as well as our company was one of the strongest things to drive forward with sort of clinical excellence and scientific discovery. I always knew from the beginning, if I do this, it has to be the best thing I've ever done. There's no like, let's give it a go. There's no let's see, let's try, let's assess. I think for me, from the very beginning, the minute I walked out the doors of a law firm, I said, I'm giving this everything I have. There is no 100%. It is 125 all the way, and that's it. And I think that we've all had different realities in terms of what this company would look like.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that we've, one of our things that we say is that we're headed to the moon on a tampon-shaped rocket. And if you get rocket ship sick, don't get in, because we're going up there. And it's one of the things that we're really driven. And I think that works well. If you have a mismatch of drive or ambition, it doesn't work. Because everyone has to want to succeed.
And have you had times where it has been difficult? Because I think 3 co-founders as well. A lot of people say, like, even you add 1 co-founder and the situation becomes really hard. Have you had times where it's been difficult to have 3?
The 3 of us work really well. We just work in such a great way. And I think that Natalie contributes something that is a completely different element and angle to what I contribute, to what Helen contributes, and the 3 of us form this perfect triangle. And it's always going to be hard. There's always going to be times where you get sick, or you have a cesarean section and you can't walk. You have things that impact you so much. Having 2 other co-founders who say, got this, at times it's a blessing. I often think that if someone is a single founder, it's all on them. There's no bowing out for one day. There's no, I need to go to the hospital, go to the doctor, look after my children. It's all on you. So actually having that balance of the 3 of us, we always joke that the 3 of us are the Powerpuff Girls. So we have the 3 Powerpuff. We've got our WhatsApp chat of Powerpuffs, and I think that is a great blessing, having the 3 of us.
And you're a fully female leadership team. So what would you say is your, what are like the main benefits, or what are the main kind of superpowers that you have as a fully female?
I mean, who run the world? Girls, right? So we've actually got a primarily female team. It's one of the only company that probably needs more men in it. Never. I think that it's, for what we are building, for what we are solving for, having a female leadership team is really important. I think that we are our mission encapsulated. We are the mothers of our movement. We are so heavily behind this from every personal perspective you could imagine, that being an all-female leadership team, there wasn't ever any doubt. There was never anyone who's ever come along who's come in that direction anyway. There's no one. It was never an option to have have a male in the leadership team.
So Deirdre, is there anything that we haven't spoken about today that you think still needs some light shed on it?
I don't know. What do you think?
I think we've covered a lot.
We've covered a lot. We've covered a lot. My voice has been a bit janky, sorry.
But Deirdre, thank you so much for coming on. You're such an inspiration. I didn't even know as well from the angle of even speaking about how you managed this business whilst you had your children and they're still growing up and you're still going so strong, and spreading the message and getting through all of these censorship issues. I mean, founding a business is hard enough, and then add on top of it everything else that you're having to deal with. That's insane. And Hertility, I mean, the space that Hertility is at now is so incredible and so impressive. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching Good Morning Harley Street.
If you are a clinician looking to build your thought leadership, check us out on LinkedIn, Dash Angelova and Martini Sue. And if you're a clinic looking for support with your marketing or with your video assets or your sales assets, then check us out on the same platforms.